Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku joined the Demon Slayer Corps to hunt the strongest demon. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The rain was a cold, persistent thing. It wasn't the gentle, cleansing rain of a spring shower, but a miserable, city-slick drizzle that mixed with the grime on the rooftops and ran in gray rivulets down alley walls. It clung to the tattered remains of Izuku Midoriya's hero costume, adding a leaden weight to the fabric that was already heavy with the burden of his self-imposed exile. He crouched on the edge of a water tower, a phantom of green and black against the bruised purple of the twilight sky. Below, the city of Muzurifu sprawled out, its neon lights smearing through the downpour like watercolors left out in a storm. It was a city he was fighting for, a city he loved, yet one he could no longer walk through. Not as himself. Stay away. Stay hidden. Protect them by being gone. The mantra had been his constant companion for weeks. It was a thorny shield he held up against the memories of his friends' faces. Uraraka's worried frown, Ida's rigid concern, Kaken's explosive, unspoken fear. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw them, and with them, the looming, skeletal grin of All for One. The villain wasn't just after him. He was after One for All. The sacred torch passed down through generations, now burning with the intensity of 9 souls within his own. To get to it, All for One would tear through everyone he had ever cared about without a second thought. So he ran. A whisper, faint as a dying breath, echoed in his mind. "You're not alone, kid." It was Nana Shimura's voice, a ghostly comfort that did little to ease the profound, physical loneliness that gnawed at him. He pushed the thought away, focusing on the hum of danger sense. For the past hour, it had been a low, insistent thrum at the base of his skull, a spiderweb of unease that had finally led him here, to this industrial district on the city's fringe. His target was a small-time villain, but one with a terrifying reputation. They called him Distorter, a man whose quirk was said to fold space, to create doorways where none should exist. The Hero Public Safety Commission had flagged him as a potential transport vector for the League of Villains. Deku couldn't allow that. The hum of danger sense sharpened into a piercing spike. There, down in the cavernous alley between 2 derelict warehouses, a figure was hunched over a sparking, makeshift device. He was wiry and twitching, clad in a stained trench coat, his eyes wide with a manic energy that was all too common in this broken world. Izuku pushed off the water tower, the wind whipping at his cowl. He activated Float, descending silently, a predator in the urban jungle. The green lightning of One for All, full cowl crackled around him at a steady 8%, a controlled storm barely contained within his limbs. He landed without a sound 10 feet behind the man. "It's over." Izuku's voice was a low rasp, rough from disuse and exhaustion. "Surrender now, and no one gets hurt." The villain, Distorter, yelped and spun around. His face was pale and sweaty, his pupils dilated. "The vigilante, they said you were fast, but..." He scrambled backward, one hand clutching a wrench, the other gesturing wildly at the humming device. "Stay back. This thing isn't stable. I don't even know what it'll do." "Then turn it off," Izuku said, taking a slow, deliberate step forward. The rain dripped from the tattered ears of his cowl. "I can't. It's gone haywire." Panic seized the man's voice. "I was just trying to build a short-range teleporter. A little pocket dimension to stash loot. But the power source, it's feeding on the storm, on the city's grid. It's out of my control." Izuku's eyes darted to the machine. It was a monstrosity of stolen parts, a traffic light, a microwave oven, and a web of copper wiring all bolted to a car battery that sizzled ominously. At its center, the air shimmered, warping like a heat haze. The space within that shimmer felt wrong. It was a void, a tear in the fabric of the world. Danger sense screamed. Not a hum, but a siren wail in his head. "Don't come any closer!" Distorter shrieked, brandishing the wrench. Izuku didn't have time for this. He needed to incapacitate the man and disable the device before it blew a hole in the district. He summoned Black Whip, tendrils of dark energy erupting from his arms. They shot forward, wrapping around the villain's limbs, yanking him off his feet and away from the machine. "I told you!" Distorter wailed as he was slammed harmlessly against the dumpster. Izuku ignored him, his focus entirely on the shimmering portal. It was growing, the air around it crackling with raw, untamed energy. He could feel the pressure changing, the gravity in the alley seeming to twist and pull towards the vortex. He had to shut it down. He used FA Gene, storing kinetic energy with a series of quick, coiled movements. 1 step, 2 steps, then he launched himself forward. His plan was simple, a precise, low-powered smash to the power source to disconnect it. But as he moved, the world dissolved into chaos. The shimmering air didn't just expand, it exploded. A wave of non-light, a pure, blinding whiteness, erupted from the machine. It wasn't a flash. It was a physical presence, a tide of raw dimensional energy that hit him like a solid wall. The sound was a deafening roar that was also a perfect silence, a paradox that scrambled his senses. He felt a horrifying sensation of being pulled apart, atom by atom. The vestiges of One for All roared in his mind, a chorus of alarm and confusion. He saw flashes of their lives. Yoichi Shigaraki reaching for his brother, the second user's desperate last stand, Nana Shimura's smiling face, all swirling in a kaleidoscopic nightmare. His body, his very existence, was being threaded through the eye of a needle he couldn't see. The concrete and rain of Mizurufu vanished, replaced by an infinite cascade of color and impossible geometry. He was everywhere and nowhere. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it ended. The pulling sensation snapped, and he was violently reassembled. He crashed onto solid ground, the impact jarring every bone in his already aching body. For a long moment, he lay there, face down in damp, loamy earth, the world spinning. The only sound was the frantic pounding of his own heart. He pushed himself up, his arms trembling. The first thing he noticed was the smell. It wasn't the familiar city scent of wet asphalt, exhaust fumes, and ozone. This was a primal, living smell, of rich soil, decaying leaves, pine needles, and a profound, ancient dampness. The second thing was the silence. The perpetual hum of the city, the traffic, the distant sirens, the lifeblood of millions, was gone. In its place was the gentle sigh of wind through countless trees and the rhythmic chirping of insects he didn't recognize. Izuku staggered to his feet, his head swimming. He was in a forest. Not a park, but a true, untamed forest. Enormous cedar and cypress trees towered over him, their dense canopy swallowing the sky, plunging the forest floor into a deep, almost absolute darkness. Patches of moonlight filtered through the leaves, dappling the ground in eerie silver. What? He breathed, his voice swallowed by the immense quiet. A quirk, an illusion, he slapped his own face, a stinging report that echoed slightly in the clearing. The pain was real. His suit was still torn, the ache in his bones was still present. This wasn't an illusion. Okay, Midoriya, think, he muttered, his training from Gran Torino kicking in. Assess the situation. Don't panic. He reached for the comms unit in his ear. This is Deku to All Might. Can anyone read me? I need a status report. Static. Utter, complete silence. He tried again. To Endeavor's agency, to anyone. I've been displaced. Location unknown. Hostile quirk suspected. Nothing. The device was dead. Not just out of range, it felt inert, a useless piece of plastic in his ear. A cold dread, far deeper than the evening chill, began to seep into him. Distorter had said the machine was unstable. He hadn't just teleported him across the city. He had teleported him, somewhere else, somewhere without a signal. Somewhere far, far away. He looked at his hands, the scarred and broken fingers that had saved so many. He could still feel One for All humming beneath his skin, a familiar and reassuring warmth. He was still himself. He still had his power. That was something. He needed to find civilization. A road, a town, anything. He chose a direction and began to walk, his footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of leaves. The forest was unnervingly alive. The shadows seemed to twist in his peripheral vision, and every snap of a twig made him flinch, danger sense buzzing at a low, anxious frequency. It wasn't the sharp spike of an immediate threat, but a general, pervasive feeling of being watched, of being in a place where he was the intruder. After what felt like an hour of pushing through dense undergrowth, a new sound reached him. It was faint at first, but it was unmistakably human. A scream. His head snapped up. All exhaustion, all confusion, was instantly burned away by a surge of adrenaline. There was someone in danger. He broke into a run, the green lightning of full cowl igniting around him. He kept it at a low 5%, just enough to propel him through the trees at a speed that blurred the forest into streaks of black and gray. He followed the sounds, another scream, this one choked off, followed by the sickening crunch of splintering wood. He burst out of the tree line, and the sight before him froze him in his tracks. It was a small, rustic village. Not a modern town, but a collection of simple wooden houses with paper-screened doors and thatched roofs, clustered around a dirt path. It looked like something out of a history book. But that wasn't what held his attention. In the center of the village, a creature stood over the shattered remains of a doorway. It was humanoid in shape, but hideously wrong. Its skin was a pale, corpse-like gray, marked with unsettling blue lines that pulsed with a faint, sickly light. Its limbs were too long, its fingers tipped with razor-sharp claws, but its face was the worst part. Its eyes were a solid, blood red, with strange characters etched into the irises. Its mouth was stretched into a wide, impossibly cruel smile, revealing rows of needle-like fangs. Blood dripped from its chin. It was a Nomu. That was his first, panic thought. A bioengineered monster created by All for One. But it wasn't. It lacked the exposed brain and the stitched-together look. This creature felt ancient. And the sheer malice radiating from it was something he had only ever felt from Shigaraki and his master. A woman was cowering on the ground, trying to shield a small child. The creature raised its clawed hand, chuckling, a sound like grinding stones. More food, it rasped. You should feel honored to become a part of me. Izuku didn't think. He acted. Get away from them! He roared, his voice booming through the night. He launched himself forward, crossing the distance in a fraction of a second. He pulled his right arm back, the familiar power of one for all swelling through his muscles. Detroit smash! He held back, instinctively keeping it at 5%. Against a normal villain, that would be enough to incapacitate without causing lethal damage. His fist connected with the creature's torso. The impact was immense. The air pressure alone kicked up a cloud of dust and sent loose debris flying. The creature's body didn't just fly backward, it exploded. The torso was completely obliterated, arms and legs sent spinning into the darkness. It was a direct, devastating hit. Izuku landed in a crouch between the monster's remains and the terrified villagers, his body thrumming with power. It's okay now, he said, not turning around. You're safe. He stood up, expecting to see a gory, but finished scene. What he saw instead made his blood run cold. The severed limbs, scattered across the ground, were writhing. The creature's head, which had rolled near a well, turned to look at him, its fanged smile still intact. My, the head hissed. That was quite a punch. You're a strong one. Izuku stared in absolute horror as the flesh began to bubble and stretch. From the bloody stump of the neck, a new torso began to grow at an impossible rate. Sinew, muscle, and bone knit themselves together in a grotesque display of regeneration. The scattered limbs dissolved into puddles of flesh that slithered back toward the main body, reabsorbing into the newly formed whole. In less than 10 seconds, the creature was standing again, completely unharmed. It cracked its neck, the sound echoing unnaturally. Hyper-regeneration. Izuku whispered, his mind racing. He'd seen it in the Heian Nomu, but nothing like this. This was instantaneous. Perfect. You smell interesting, the demon mused, taking a step forward. Its red eyes gleamed with hungry curiosity. So much power, so much vitality. You'll be a feast fit for a king. Izuku's mind was a maelstrom of confusion. This wasn't a quirk. No quirk worked like this. What was this thing? He didn't have time to figure it out. The creature lunged, its claws extended. It was fast, far faster than any normal human, but to Izuku, it was moving in slow motion. He sidestepped easily, letting its claws tear through the space where he'd been standing. He spun, channeling power into his leg for a kick aimed at its head. His steel-toed boot connected with the side of its jaw with a sickening crunch. The creature's head was knocked clean off its shoulders, sent flying into the wall of a nearby house where it splattered like an overripe fruit. Izuku landed, breathing heavily. That had to be it. Destroy the brain. That was the only way to stop Anoma. But the headless body didn't fall. It stood there for a second before a new head, identical to the first, sprouted from the stump with the same horrifying speed. Decapitation doesn't work either? The creature laughed, the sound bubbling from its new throat. Who are you? You're no Slayer. You don't have a Nichiren blade. Slayer? Nichiren blade? The words meant nothing to him. This was wrong. Everything was wrong. His attacks, which should have been decisive, were completely ineffective. He was fighting something that defied every law of biology and combat he had ever known. The creature lunged again, and this time Izuku used Black Whip. The dark tendrils shot out, wrapping around the monster's arms and legs, pinning it in place. The creature struggled, its immense strength testing the limits of the energy whips. What is this art? It snarled, straining against the bonds. It feels alive. I don't have time to explain. Izuku grunted, pouring more energy into Black Whip. He had to find a weakness. There had to be one. He looked around desperately, his eyes scanning the environment. The villagers were scrambling away, seeking shelter. The moon was high in the sky. The forest was dark. Nothing. Then, the creature did something unexpected. It stopped struggling. A cruel intelligence lit up its eyes. You're trying so hard to protect them, it cooed. Let's see how you handle this. With a roar, it tore one of its own arms off. The severed limb, freed from Black Whip, morphed and elongated, sprouting claws and a fanged mouth. It shot past Izuku, a living projectile aimed directly at the woman and child, who had only managed to crawl a few feet away. No! Izuku screamed. He had no choice. He released Black Whip from the main body, retasking all the tendrils to intercept the flying arm. They caught it just inches from the child's face, a writhing prison of dark energy. But in that split second, the main creature was free. It charged him, its claws aimed for his throat. Izuku reacted on pure instinct. He dropped low, spun, and channeled 20% into an uppercut. Manchester smash. The blow connected squarely under the creature's chin. The force was astronomical. The monster's entire body was launched vertically into the air, a silent rocket ascending into the night sky. Izuku watched it go, a tiny speck against the moon, before it disappeared from sight. He stood there, chest heaving, the green lightning dancing around him. He had bought some time. But he knew it wouldn't be dead. It would regenerate and fall back to Earth eventually. He had to get these people to safety. He turned to the woman. Are you all right? Is anyone else hurt? The woman stared at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and awe. She couldn't form words, only managing a trembling nod. Suddenly, a new sensation prickled at Izuku's skin. It wasn't danger sense. It was a change in the air, a warmth on the back of his neck. The darkness of the forest was beginning to recede, replaced by a soft, gray light on the eastern horizon. Dawn. The sun was rising. A sound from above drew his attention. It was a scream. Not of rage, but of pure, unadulterated terror. The creature was falling back to earth, its body already fully regenerated. But as it fell out of the deep shadow of the night, and into the first rays of the nascent sun, something happened. It began to smoke. No, not yet. I was so close. The creature shrieked, its voice filled with a panic Izuku hadn't heard before. It clawed at its own skin, which was now visibly sizzling, turning gray and flaky like burning paper. It crashed into the village square, not with a thud, but with the sound of crumbling ash. It tried to drag itself towards the shadow of a house, its body disintegrating with every movement. Curse you! Curse the sun! It howled, its voice growing weaker. Its flesh peeled away, revealing charred bone, which then also turned to dust. In a matter of seconds, the terrifying monster that had been completely impervious to his strongest attacks was reduced to nothing more than a pile of ash and a stained yukata, which blew away in the morning breeze. Izuku stood in stunned silence, his mind utterly blank. He stared at the spot where the creature had been, then at his own hands, then back at the spot. Regenerated from total obliteration. Regenerated from decapitation. Its only weakness was sunlight? What in the world had he gotten himself into? Hey! What was all that ruckus? A new voice, loud and boisterous, cut through his thoughts. Izuku spun around, his body instantly tensing back into a combat stance. 3 figures were emerging from the forest path, their silhouettes stark against the rising sun. One was short and wore a strange, hollowed-out boar's head as a mask. He was shirtless despite the morning chill, revealing a ridiculously muscular physique. He carried 2 Nichiren swords, their blades jagged and chipped like saw teeth. Another was a boy with a shock of yellow-orange hair, wearing a yellow and orange triangle-patterned haori over a dark uniform. He looked absolutely terrified, his body trembling as he clung to the third figure's arm. The third figure, the one in the center, was a young man with kind, gentle eyes, dark red hair slicked back, and a prominent scar on his forehead. He wore a checkered green and black haori, and a wooden box was strapped to his back. A katana with a circular hilt was sheathed at his waist. Izuku's posture relaxed slightly. They looked human. They were dressed strangely, but they didn't radiate the same pure malice as the creature. The boy in the boar mask, however, pointed one of his jagged blades directly at Izuku. "You!" he bellowed, his voice muffled by the mask. "You've got some power. I felt that tremor all the way from the mountain. Fight me, spiky green thing." "Inosuke, stop it!" the red-haired boy said, his voice firm but calm. He put a hand on the boar boy's shoulder. "Wah! Tanjiro, don't you see him?" the yellow-haired boy shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at Izuku. "He's all tattered and glowing. He smells like lightning and trouble. And look at his clothes. What are those weird rabbit ears? He's probably a demon's weird cousin. We're gonna die." "Zenitsu, calm down," the boy named Tanjiro said patiently, before turning his gaze to Izuku. His eyes were surprisingly sharp, analytical. He took in Izuku's ragged state, the exhaustion etched onto his face, the strange green lightning that was now fading around his body. Izuku just stared at them, his brain struggling to process the new arrivals. Boar mask, scaredy cat, and a calm one with a box. They were speaking Japanese, but their dialect was archaic, their clothes from another era. And they carried swords. Tanjiro took a cautious step forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his katana but not drawing it. He was observing Izuku, but not just with his eyes. He sniffed the air, his expression shifting from curiosity to confusion, and then to a deep, profound empathy. Izuku watched him, bewildered. Why was he sniffing the air like that? Tanjiro's eyes softened. "The scent coming from you," he said, his voice quiet and serious. "It's confusing. I smell overwhelming grief, and a determination so strong it's almost painful. I smell righteousness. But I also smell things I've never smelled before, the scent of burned sugar, lightning, and steel and glass buildings. It's not the scent of a demon. You're human, but you're not from around here, are you?" Izuku's jaw went slack. How could he possibly know that? Was it a quirk? Some kind of hypersensitive sense of smell? I don't know, Izuku admitted, his voice barely a whisper. The adrenaline from the fight was gone, and in its place, a tidal wave of exhaustion and disorientation crashed over him. "I don't know where here is. I am the great Inosuke Hashibara. And I demand a fight to test your strength." The boar-masked boy, Inosuke, shouted, unable to contain himself any longer. He let out a guttural cry and charged, his twin blades raised. Beast breathing, third form, devour. He moved with a surprising, feral grace, his blades slashing in a pincer-like motion. Izuku, running on pure reflex, simply sidestepped. Inosuke's attack tore through the air where he'd been standing, carving 2 deep gouges in the dirt. "Whoa, fast!" Inosuke cackled, turning for another assault. "Inosuke, I said stop!" Tanjiro yelled, and this time he moved, grabbing the back of Inosuke's waistband and hauling him back like an unruly cat. "Let go of me, Gambakiro! I have to fight him. His name is Tanjiro!" Zenitsu wailed. "And leave that scary monster man alone before he punches us into dust like he did to that demon." Demon. They called the creature a demon. The word resonated with Izuku. It fit better than villain or nomu. It was a simple, ancient word for a simple, ancient evil. The world was starting to tilt. The faces of the strange trio began to blur. His legs felt like they were made of lead. He had been running for weeks. He hadn't had a proper meal or a full night's sleep in what felt like a lifetime. He had fought a space-time villain, been torn apart and reassembled, navigated a hostile forest, battled an unkillable monster, and now he was facing down a boy in a boar mask who wanted to fight him. It was all too much. His control over One for All sputtered and died. The reassuring warmth vanished, leaving him feeling hollow and cold. His knees buckled. "Whoa!" Tanjiro cried out, letting go of Inosuke and rushing forward. He caught Izuku just before he hit the ground, grunting at his unexpected weight. "He's completely exhausted." Izuku's vision swam. The last thing he saw was the earnest, concerned face of the boy with the checkered haori, his kind eyes looking down at him. He could smell charcoal and sunshine, and a faint, sweet scent like flowers. It was a comforting smell. "What do we do with him, Tanjiro?" He heard Zenitsu's worried voice from far away. "He's not an enemy," Tanjiro's voice replied, resolute and firm. "He protected those people. He's hurt and lost. We're going to help him." A grunt of reluctant agreement came from Inosuke. "Fine. But when he wakes up, he's fighting me." The darkness finally claimed him. For the first time in a long time, as he drifted into unconsciousness, Izuku Midoriya didn't feel entirely alone. He was in a world without heroes, a world of demons and slayers, but he had been found by someone with the unmistakable scent of kindness. And for now, that was enough. A gentle light filtered through a paper screen, painting a warm, latticed pattern on his eyelids. The first sensation to register in Izuku Midoriya's consciousness was not sight or sound, but smell. It was a clean, medicinal scent, a complex bouquet of dried herbs, sharp antiseptic, and the subtle sweetness of wisteria blossoms. It was a stark, almost violent contrast to the grime of his vigilante crusade and the primal dampness of the forest. He groaned, a low sound of protest from a body that felt both impossibly heavy and strangely light. He was lying on something soft, a futon, he realized, the mattress thin but comfortable, the blanket tucked around him with a meticulous care he hadn't felt in months. His eyes fluttered open. He was in a simple, well-kept room. The walls were wood and plaster, the floor was tatami matting, and the only furniture besides his futon was a small wooden table with a cup of water on it. The air was still and peaceful. For a terrifying moment, he wondered if he was dead. "He's awake!" a small voice whispered. Izuku turned his head slowly, his neck muscles protesting. 3 young girls in simple blue and white uniforms were peeking around the edge of the sliding door, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. They couldn't have been much older than Eri. The thought sent a sharp pang of homesickness through his chest, so potent it almost made him gasp. One of the girls, braver than the others, scurried in. "You shouldn't move too much," she said, her voice soft. "Lady Shinobu said you were completely exhausted." Lady Shinobu? The name meant nothing to him. Before he could ask, another figure entered the room. This one was older, a teenager with her hair in twintails, fastened with blue butterfly clips. She had a stern, no-nonsense expression on her face. "Kyo Sumi Naho, get back to your duties," she ordered, her tone sharp. "Don't bother our guest." The 3 little girls squeaked and vanished, their footsteps pattering away down a wooden hallway. The teen turned her stern gaze on Izuku. "I am Aoi Kenzaki. You're at the Butterfly Mansion, the Demon Slayer Corps' recovery facility." Demon Slayer Corps. Izuku repeated the word slowly. Slayer. That's what the creature, the demon, had called him. "You're no slayer. Tanjiro and the others brought you here," Aoi continued, seemingly unimpressed by his confusion. "They said you fought a demon and collapsed. Considering the state you were in, it's a miracle you're alive at all." She gestured to his body. His tattered hero costume had been removed, cleaned, and folded neatly on the floor beside him. He was dressed in a simple cotton yukata. "Your clothes are bizarre. Are you a foreigner?" It's complicated," Izuku managed, pushing himself into a sitting position. His muscles screamed in protest. Every fiber of his being ached with a profound, bone-deep fatigue. He felt like he'd just run a marathon after bench pressing a building. "Moshi Moshi," a voice, light and musical as a wind chime, drifted into the room. A woman appeared in the doorway, moving with a fluid grace that seemed almost unreal. She was petite, with large, compound-like purple eyes and a serene smile that didn't quite reach them. She wore the same dark uniform as Aoi, but over it was a white haori with a pattern that mimicked the wings of a butterfly. A katana with a distinctive, flower-shaped guard was at her hip. Aoi immediately bowed. Lady Shinobu, this was the woman they had mentioned. Izuku felt a prickle at the base of his neck. It wasn't the sharp alarm of danger sense, but a low-level hum of caution. This woman, despite her gentle appearance, was dangerous. He could feel it. My, you're finally awake, Shinobu Kocho said, her smile widening slightly as she glided to his bedside. She knelt beside the futon, her movements economical and precise. I am Shinobu Kocho, the insect Hashira of the Demon Slayer Corps. It's a pleasure to meet you. Hashira? Izuku asked, the word unfamiliar. The highest-ranking members of the Corps, she explained cheerfully. Now I must say, you are quite the medical marvel, Midoriya-kun. Tanjiro-kun told us your name. Her eyes scanned him, and he felt less like a patient and more like a specimen under a microscope. I took the liberty of performing a small examination while you were unconscious. Your muscle density is extraordinary. Several times that of a normal, well-trained man. Your bone structure shows signs of repeated, severe fractures that have healed with almost impossible resilience. And your heart, it beats like a drum preparing for war, even in sleep. Is this sort of physiology common where you are from? Izuku swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. He couldn't just tell her about one for all. The secret was too great, too dangerous. Where I'm from, some people are just born different, he said evasively. We call it a quirk. A quirk, Shinobu repeated, tilting her head. The butterfly ornament in her hair shifted. A charming name for such a potent mutation. And this quirk of yours, it allowed you to obliterate a demon's torso with a single punch? Tanjiro's report was quite vivid. It's a strength-enhancing quirk, Izuku said, sticking to the simplest possible explanation. He decided to leave out the other 6 quirks for now. I see. Her smile remained, a placid, beautiful mask. And your scars. You have so many, a tapestry of old pain. But none of them appear to be from a blade. They are mostly impact fractures, tears, and burns. You fight with your body, not a weapon. And yet you faced a demon. How very brave, and how very foolish. There was a faint, sharp edge to her voice now, like a needle hidden in silk. You understand, of course, that your existence is a problem. You appeared from nowhere, possessing monstrous strength, wearing clothes from no known land, and you were found at the site of a demon attack. For all we know, you could be a new, exotic type of demon yourself, one that can walk in the sun. Izuku's eyes widened. No! I'm human! That thing, that demon, it tried to kill me. It killed villagers. Oh, I believe you, she said, her tone soothing again, the shift seamless and disorienting. Your scent is entirely human, according to Tanjiro-kun, but you are an anomaly, and our master must be made aware of all anomalies. Especially ones with the power to level a building. As if on cue, a harsh caw echoed from outside. A Kasugai crow, its feathers black as obsidian, landed on the windowsill. Call! Emergency Hashira meeting. The boy in green is to be brought before the master. Call! Immediately, Shinobu's smile tightened for a fraction of a second. Well, it seems the decision has been made for us. Your audience awaits. She stood up gracefully. Aoi, please bring him his strange uniform. It seems our guest has an appointment to keep. The journey to the Ubuyashiki estate was a blur for Izuku. He was still weak, his thoughts a tangled mess of confusion and anxiety. He had been given back his hero costume, the Gamma version, now dirt-stained and torn in several places. The familiar weight of it was a small comfort in this bizarre new reality. Shinobu walked beside him, her pace unhurried, while 2 silent, masked Kakushi members followed at a respectful distance. They walked through the sprawling grounds of what looked like a large, traditional Japanese compound. The air was clean, the gardens were immaculate, and the ever-present scent of wisteria hung heavy in the air. Izuku knew from his history classes that wisteria was said to repel demons in folklore. Here, it seemed to be a literal line of defense. They finally arrived at a vast, open courtyard of raked white gravel. At the far end was a grand estate, its wooden endowa veranda overlooking the garden. And standing there, waiting, were the Hashira. Izuku's breath caught in his throat. It was one thing to hear the title, another to see them assembled. They were a terrifying, vibrant, and utterly imposing collection of individuals. Even from a distance, the sheer pressure they exuded was immense. Each one of them felt as powerful as a top 10 pro hero, but their energy was different, sharper, deadlier, honed for a single, lethal purpose. A giant of a man, easily over 7 feet tall, stood with his back to them, large prayer beads wrapped around his massive hands. Tears streamed freely from his blind, white eyes as he chanted a low sutra. His presence was like a mountain, solid, unmovable, and filled with a deep, resonating sorrow. Perched in the branches of a nearby pine tree was a smaller man with mismatched yellow and turquoise eyes, his face almost entirely covered in bandages. A white snake was coiled around his neck, its red eyes mirroring its master's suspicious gaze. A young woman with bright pink hair braided into thick plaits was looking at him with wide, curious green eyes, a faint blush on her cheeks. She seemed almost nervous, her hand fluttering near the hilt of her whip-like sword. A young boy who couldn't be older than 14 stood staring blankly at the sky, his expression vacant, as if he wasn't part of the gathering at all. He seemed to be tracing the shapes of the clouds with his eyes. A man with wild, white hair and a face covered in jagged scars radiated an aura of pure, unrestrained aggression. He was grinning, but it was a vicious, bloodthirsty expression that made the hairs on Izuku's arms stand on end. He looked like a wolf that had been waiting for a rabbit to stumble into its den. And then there was the man in the checkered haori, standing slightly apart from the others. Jutomioka. Tanjiro had mentioned his name. He stood silently, his expression stoic and unreadable, his deep blue eyes fixed on Izuku. There was a profound loneliness about him that felt strangely familiar to Izuku, a mirror of his own self-imposed isolation. As Shinobu led Izuku into the center of the gravel courtyard, all eyes turned to him. The collective weight of their stares was a physical force. So, a loud, bombastic voice erupted, making Izuku jump. A towering man, even taller than the weeping giant, stepped forward. He had white hair, a strange red marking around one eye, and was adorned with glittering jewels and gold bands. He struck a pose, flexing his considerable muscles. This is the flamboyant anomaly. I must say, his attire is dreadfully unflamboyant, but the power I'm sensing is first-rate. A dazzling specimen. This was Tenjin Yuzui, the sound Hashira. His appraisal was so over the top that Izuku didn't know how to react. He does not look like a demon, the pink-haired girl, Mitsuri Kenroji, the love Hashira, said softly, though her voice carried. She clasped her hands to her cheeks. Oh my, his muscles are so well-defined, and he has such earnest, worried eyes. How cute! She thought, her internal monologue a flurry of excitement. Do not be fooled by appearances, Kenroji. The man in the tree, Abanai Iguro, the serpent Hashira, hissed, his voice cold and sharp. Anything that is not of the core is a potential enemy. His very existence here is a contamination. The white-haired man, Sanemi Shinizugawa, the wind Hashira, finally strode forward, his grin widening into a snarl. Contamination is right, Iguro. I heard the report. Punched a demon to pieces. It regenerated. He fought it until sunrise. Sounds like a damn fairy tale to me. He stopped a few feet from Izuku, sniffing the air aggressively. He stinks of sweat and something weird, like burned sugar. But he doesn't stink like a demon. So what the hell is he? Izuku stood his ground, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He was outnumbered and out of his depth, but he wouldn't show fear. My name is Izuku Midoriya. I am not your enemy. Sanemi laughed, a harsh, grating sound. Not our enemy? You show up out of thin air with strength that rivals a Hashira and you expect us to just welcome you with open arms? He suddenly drew his Nichiren blade, its green, serrated edge glinting in the sun. The wind seemed to swirl around him. How about a little test? Let's see how well you regenerate when I slice off one of your limbs. He lunged. The movement was a blur of speed and aggression. Izuku's danger sense flared. He didn't even have time to activate One for All. He acted on pure instinct, dropping and rolling to the side as Sanemi's blade cut through the space where his neck had been. The wind pressure from the slash kicked up a shower of gravel. Ho! Sanemi grunted, surprised by the boy's reflexes. Shinizugawa. That is enough. A deep, resonant voice commanded. It was the giant, Jyomi Himejima, the stone Hashira. He had turned to face them, the tears still streaming down his face. The master has not yet arrived. Show some restraint. He clasped his prayer beads together with a sharp clack. Namu Amida Butsu, such a sorrowful child. He carries the weight of 100 souls on his shoulders. A burden no boy should have to bear. Sanemi shot him an irritated glare but lowered his blade, though he didn't sheath it. He's a threat, Himejima. You of all people should understand the danger of trusting outsiders. He saved those villagers. A voice called out. Izuku turned. Tanjiro, along with Zenitsu and Inosuke, was kneeling at the edge of the Engawa, not far from the Hashira. It was Tanjiro who had spoken, his voice ringing with conviction. I was there. I smelled no deceit on him, only exhaustion and righteousness. He fought to protect people he didn't even know. Zenitsu was visibly shaking, looking like he was about to faint. He's so scary, all of them are so scary, why are we even here? He whimpered. Inosuke, surprisingly, was just watching Izuku with an intense, analytical gaze from behind his boar mask. He wasn't shouting for a fight. He had seen Izuku's reflexive dodge. It was clean, efficient, and completely instinctual. This wasn't just raw power, it was trained power, Sanemi scoffed. The word of a rookie who travels with a demon is hardly credible. The jab at Tanjiro and Izuku was sharp and cruel. Jutomioka's hand tightened on the hilt of his sword, his jaw clenching, but he remained silent. The tension in the courtyard was thick enough to choke on. Izuku stood in the center of a storm of suspicion and hostility. He was alone, in a world he didn't understand, being judged by its most powerful warriors for a crime he didn't commit. He thought of All Might, of his unwavering smile in the face of impossible odds. He straightened his back, lifted his chin, and met Sanemi's glare without flinching. I will answer any questions you have, Izuku said, his voice steady. But I will not be executed for saving lives. Just as Sanemi was about to retort, two small voices spoke in unison. The master has arrived. Instantaneously, the atmosphere shifted. Every single Hashira, without a moment's hesitation, turned and dropped to one knee, their heads bowed in absolute reverence. Even the furious Sanemi and the aloof Abanai submitted at once, their hostility vanishing in the face of a higher authority. Two young girls with identical white hair and placid faces guided a man forward onto the veranda. He was dressed in a simple, dark kimono. His face, from the eyes up, was covered by a grotesque, spreading scar or curse that looked like rotting flesh. He was blind. Yet he carried himself with an aura of profound peace and unwavering authority. This was Kagaya Ubuyashiki, the 97th leader of the Demon Slayer Corps. Good morning, my children. Kagaya's voice was soft, almost hypnotically calm. It flowed over the tense courtyard like a gentle stream, washing away the anger. The weather is beautiful today. I wonder if the sky is blue. We are honored to be in your presence, Oyakata-sama, Sanemi said, his voice now filled with a deep, respectful deference that was shockingly at odds with his earlier rage. We pray for your continued good fortune. Thank you, Sanemi, Kagaya said, a faint, gentle smile gracing his lips. He turned his head slowly, his blind eyes seeming to focus directly on Izuku. And welcome, Izuku Midoriya. I am sorry for the aggressive welcome. My children are passionate. Their caution is born from countless losses. Izuku, overwhelmed, quickly dropped to one knee as well, mimicking the others. Sir, Please stand, Kagaya interrupted gently. You are our guest. I have heard the reports from Tanjiro and Shinobu. A boy from another world. It is a fantastic story. I would like to hear it from you. Izuku slowly rose to his feet, his heart pounding. All the Hashira were still kneeling, their attention fixed on him and their master. This was it. This was his one chance. He took a deep breath, pushing down the panic and channeling the focused clarity he used in a crisis. My name is Izuku Midoriya. I am not from this time. Or maybe, not from this world. I'm not sure, he started to explain. He spoke of his home, a world of gleaming cities of steel and glass, of strange technologies called cars and smartphones. He spoke of a society where roughly 80% of the population was born with a unique superpower, a biological abnormality they called a quirk. The Hashira listened in stunned silence. Mitsuri's eyes were wide with wonder. Tenjin looked flamboyantly fascinated. Abanai's snake seemed to hiss in disbelief. In my world, Izuku continued, his voice gaining confidence, we don't have demon slayers. We have heroes, men and women who use their quirks to protect the innocent and fight against those who would use their powers for evil. It's a profession. A government-sanctioned job. I am a student at the Top Hero Academy, Yue High School. He held up his scarred right hand. My quirk is called One for All. It's a power that can be passed down from one person to another, and it stockpiles strength. I am the 9th holder of this power. He saw Shinobu's eyes narrow slightly, her scientific mind trying to process the concept of a transferable genetic trait. There is a villain in my world. Izuku's tone grew dark, the memory of the skeletal man in the life support chair rising in his mind. A man who has lived for over a century. His name is All for One. His quirk allows him to steal the quirks of others, and to give them to his followers. He has amassed hundreds of powers, making him effectively immortal. He commands an army of villains and creates monstrous, bioengineered beasts called Nomu to sow chaos and destruction. He is the ultimate evil, a symbol of fear who manipulates society from the shadows. He paused, taking a breath. As he spoke, he saw a flicker of recognition in the Hashira's eyes. A man who lives for centuries? Who creates monsters? Who commands a legion of followers? Kagaya's serene expression didn't change, but his presence seemed to intensify. I was fighting to stop him, Izuku said, his voice thick with emotion. I had to leave my friends, my school, to keep them safe. Because he wants my power above all else. During a fight with one of his followers, a villain whose quirk could manipulate space, there was an accident. A portal, and I woke up here, he finished, his chest heaving. He had laid his entire, impossible truth bare. He looked at Kagaya Ubuyashiki, his fate hanging on the man's judgment. The courtyard was silent for a long moment. The only sounds were the wind rustling the trees and Jiomiai's soft, rhythmic chanting. It was Kagaya who broke the silence. A villain who can steal the abilities of others and grant them to his followers, he mused, his voice soft but carrying immense weight. A man who has defied a natural lifespan, who orchestrates darkness from the shadows, and who is the progenitor of the monsters you fight. Does this sound familiar to you, my children? The realization dawned on every Hashira at once. Sanemi's eyes widened. Tengen's flamboyant smirk faded. Ju's stoic expression finally cracked with a flicker of understanding. Musen Kibutsuji, Shinobu whispered, her voice barely audible. Precisely, Kagaya said. It seems, Izuku Midoriya, that you have been fighting a different version of our own ancient enemy. Your All for One and our Musen are two sides of the same cursed coin. A predator who sits at the apex of his world, devouring the lives and futures of others to ensure his own supremacy. He turned his blind gaze back to Izuku, and for the first time, Izuku felt truly seen. You are not a threat, Kagaya declared, his voice ringing with finality. You are a casualty of a war that transcends dimensions. A soul burdened by a fight nearly identical to our own. The universe, in its strange and unknowable way, has not brought us a problem. It has brought us an ally. A collective, silent shock went through the Hashira. Oyakata-sama! Sanemi protested, unable to stop himself. You can't be serious. We know nothing about him. This quirk, it's an unknown quantity. He could lose control. He could be a beacon for demons. He is a beacon of hope, Sanemi, Kagaya corrected gently. He is a typhoon that has been swept into our small pond. We will not cast him out. We will learn from him, and he will learn from us. He smiled. Izuku Midoriya. Your goal is to return to your world and finish your fight. I understand this. And we will help you. A power strong enough to tear a hole between worlds to bring you here might be triggered again by an event of similar magnitude, such as the death of Muzan Kibutsuji. Therefore, your path forward is clear. Fight with us. Lend us your quirk. Help us eradicate the demons that plague this land, and in doing so, you may find your own path home. He was offering him a place. A purpose. A tangible goal that aligned with his own heroic spirit. The offer to help him get home was more than he could have ever dared to hope for. Tears welled in Izuku's eyes, not of sadness, but of overwhelming relief and gratitude. After weeks of running, of being alone, of pushing everyone away, he had been accepted. I will, Izuku said, his voice thick but firm. He dropped back to one knee, bowing his head fully this time. I will do everything in my power to help you defeat Muzan. I swear it on my life as a hero. Kagaya Ubuyashiki nodded slowly. Then it is decided. Izuku Midoriya is not a prisoner, nor a threat. He is a special asset to the Demon Slayer Corps. A pillar of hope in a different form. Shinobu, you will oversee his integration. Assess the limits of his abilities. Find him a task suited to his unique talents. The rest of you will treat him as a comrade in arms. A murmur of assent went through the Hashira. Sanemi was still visibly furious, but he bit his tongue and bowed his head, submitting to his master's will. He shot one last venomous glare at Izuku before stalking away the moment the meeting was dismissed. Tenjin laughed loudly, declaring that things just got 1,000 times more flamboyant. Before disappearing, the others dispersed one by one, leaving only Shinobu, Ju, and Tanjiro's group. Shinobu's smile was back, but now it held a spark of genuine, manic scientific curiosity. Well now, she said cheerfully. This will be fascinating. We have much work to do, Midoriya-kun. As Izuku stood up, his legs still trembling slightly, he felt a presence beside him. It was Tanjiro, who offered him a small, encouraging smile. I knew Oyakata-sama would understand, he said. Welcome to the Demon Slayer Corps, Midoriya-kun. Izuku looked from Tanjiro's kind face to the stoic Ju, to the intrigued Shinobu. He looked at the vast estate, at the ancient trees, at the sky that seemed so much older than the one he knew. He was stranded, a universe away from everyone he loved. But he was no longer adrift. He had a mission. He had allies. He had a new war to fight, and a new demon to hunt. And as he clenched his fists, feeling the faint, familiar spark of one for all returning to his core, he made a silent vow. He would face this world's all for one. He would become the hero this world needed, until he could return to his own. The days that followed the Hashira meeting were a strange, disorienting blend of grueling rehabilitation and intensive study. Izuku Midoriya, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, was not running. He was stationary, rooted in the strange but tranquil grounds of the Butterfly Mansion. Under Shinobu Kocho's watchful, endlessly curious eyes, he was subjected to a battery of tests that were part medical examination, part combat assessment, and part scientific interrogation. She had him lift massive stones, run laps around the entire estate until the ground trembled, and punch specially reinforced training dummies that splintered into sawdust under his lightest blows. Her notebooks filled with meticulously detailed observations, sketches of his muscle fibers as she imagined them, and complex calculations regarding his force output. Fascinating, she would murmur, tapping a pen to her chin as Izuku, drenched in sweat and breathing heavily, held a 5% full cowl. The energy transference is almost perfectly efficient. There's no heat loss, no wasted kinetic force. It's not a biological function as we know it. It's more akin to a law of physics being rewritten inside your very cells. Tell me again about the vestiges? Izuku did his best to explain the abstract concept of sentient wills living within his quirk, but to a woman of science and medicine in a world without such phenomena, it sounded like ghost stories. Yet, she listened intently, her mind working to find a logical framework for the impossible. While his body recovered its strength, his mind was racing to catch up. He devoured every scroll and book the Corps would give him. He learned about the hierarchy, Mizunoto, the lowest rank, all the way up to the godlike Hashira. He learned about the Kasugai crows that served as messengers, a system both primitive and brilliantly effective. Most importantly, he learned about demons. He learned of their immortality, their insatiable hunger for human flesh, and their absolute subservience to their progenitor, Musen Kibutsuji. He learned that the only things that could kill them were the sun or a blade forged from a unique, sun-absorbing ore, a Nichiren blade. This last point became a sticking point. If I'm going to fight demons, I need to be able to kill them, Izuku stated one afternoon in the training dojo. He was facing Tanjiro, who had graciously volunteered to be his sparring partner. I can't rely on the sun to be there every time. And launching them into the stratosphere isn't a sustainable strategy. Tanjiro nodded, his expression serious. He held a wooden practice sword. You need a Nichiren blade. Every slayer carries one. The color of the blade changes to reflect the user and their breathing style. He looked at Izuku with curiosity. I wonder what color yours would be. Shinobu, observing from the veranda, clapped her hands together lightly. An excellent point. We can't have our special asset bludgeoning demons until sunrise. It's terribly inefficient. She smiled. I've already arranged for a standard-issue katana to be delivered for you. Let's see how you handle it. A few minutes later, a Kakushi member presented Izuku with a sheathed katana. It was simple but well made, the hilt wrapped in black Ito cord. Izuku drew the blade. It was a deep, metallic gray, reflecting the light of the dojo. It felt strange in his hands, balanced but foreign. He had trained in staff fighting with Gran Torino, but a sword was an entirely different discipline. The key is to channel your energy through it, Tanjiro explained earnestly. When I use water breathing, I feel the flow of the water guiding my blade. It becomes an extension of my body and my will. Izuku nodded, trying to understand. It wasn't about raw power, it was about synergy. He took a deep breath, mimicking the steady, rhythmic breathing he'd seen Tanjiro practice. He activated one for all, full cowl at a mere 5%. The green lightning crackled to life, not just around his body, but arcing down his arm. He focused, trying to push that river of energy from his shoulder, through his arm, into his hand, and down the length of the steel. He imagined it as a circuit, the blade as the final conduit. For a single, beautiful second, it worked. The entire blade began to glow with a faint, ethereal green light. A low hum vibrated through the hilt, a sound of immense power being contained. Incredible! Tanjiro breathed, his eyes wide with awe. Then, with a sound like a gunshot, it failed. A network of hairline fractures instantly spiderwebbed across the blade's surface. Before Izuku could even react, the katana exploded, not into a few large pieces, but into a cloud of razor-sharp shrapnel that shot across the dojo. Izuku instinctively threw up his arms to shield his face, the tiny metal fragments pinging harmlessly off his hardened skin. Tanjiro yelped and dove for cover. When the dust settled, Izuku was left holding nothing but the hilt and a few inches of jagged, twisted metal. The air smelled of ozone and hot steel. There was a dead silence. Shinobu stared, her placid smile finally gone, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated shock. Tanjiro peeked out from behind a training post, his face pale. Izuku said, looking at the pathetic remains of the sword in his hand. Oops. The news of a Nichiren blade spontaneously detonating traveled through the core with the speed of a Kasugai crow on a mission. It reached the swordsmith village within a day, and with it came a man. He arrived like a storm front, wearing a strange, clown-like Hayatoko mask and a sedge hat adorned with wind chimes that jingled furiously with every stomping step he took. He was tall and wiry, and radiating an aura of such intense, focused fury that even the butterflies in the mansion gardens seemed to give him a wide berth. This was Hotaru Haganazuka, the swordsmith responsible for Tanjiro's blade, and a man whose passion for his craft bordered on violent insanity. He stormed into the dojo where Izuku was attempting, and failing, to learn basic sword stances from a very patient Aoi. He was holding the hilt with the shattered remnant of the blade, brandishing it like a murder weapon. You! He roared, his voice a distorted bellow from behind the mask. He pointed a trembling, accusatory finger at Izuku. You are the blade breaker. The art murderer, the child who was given a gift from the gods and used it for target practice. Izuku flinched back. I am so sorry. It was an accident. I didn't mean to. Do not speak to me of accidents. Haganazuka shrieked, the wind chimes on his hat jangling madly. He began chasing Izuku around the dojo, swinging the broken hilt. I spend days, weeks, purifying myself. I pray to the mountain gods. I forge with every ounce of my soul, pouring my life force into the steel. And you destroy it in seconds. How dare you? How dare you be born? Ah, Haganazuka-san, please calm down, Tanjiro said, rushing in to try and mediate. He didn't know his own strength. Haganazuka stopped his assault, but only to whirl on Tanjiro. And you're no better. Always chipping and breaking my beautiful creations. I swear I will kill you both. The tantrum was so extreme, so utterly theatrical, that Izuku could only stand there, bewildered. It was like watching a performance, albeit a terrifying one. After several minutes of incoherent screaming and threats of violence that had to be defused by Shinobu's unnervingly cheerful intervention, Haganazuka finally calmed down enough to be coherent. He snatched the broken hilt from Izuku's hand, examining the jagged edge where the steel had sheared off. He ran a finger over the crystalline fracture points. His rage slowly, perceptibly, began to transform into something else. The grain, it's been completely pulverized, he muttered, his voice dropping from a shriek to an intense whisper. The molecular bonds were not cut. They were overloaded, obliterated by a pure, concussive energy I've never seen before. He looked up at Izuku, his masked face unreadable, but the energy coming off him had changed from white-hot anger to a burning, obsessive curiosity. Show me, he demanded. Show me this quirk of yours. Hesitantly, Izuku led him outside to a clearing. He picked up a large boulder, one of the ones Shinobu used for his strength tests. It was the size of a small car. Okay, Izuku said, I'll use the same percentage I used on the sword. He took a breath, activated 8% full cowl. He'd misjudged earlier, it was slightly more than 5%, and punched the boulder. There was no finesse. Just a raw, controlled application of power. The boulder didn't crack or shatter. It simply ceased to exist, erupting into a cloud of fine dust and gravel that billowed outwards. Haganazuka stood perfectly still amidst the swirling dust cloud, the wind chimes on his hat tinkling softly. He was silent for a full minute. Then, he let out a low, shaky laugh. It was a sound far more unsettling than his rage. Impossible, he breathed. To turn solid rock to dust with a single blow. That's not the strength of a man. That's the strength of a natural disaster. He turned to face Izuku, his entire body trembling not with anger, but with an ecstatic, feverish excitement. A challenge, he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion, to forge a blade that can not only withstand that power, but channel it. A blade that will not break. A blade fit for a god of destruction. His eyes, visible through the holes in his mask, were gleaming with a terrifying, manic light. This will be my masterpiece. My magnum opus. The culmination of my entire life's work. He grabbed Izuku by the shoulders, his grip surprisingly strong. But the standard scarlet, crimson, iron, sand, and scarlet, or won't be enough. It's too brittle. It can't handle this kind of resonance. I need something more. Something denser, purer. Izuku blinked. Something more? The place where you arrived. Haganazuka exclaimed, shaking him. The villain's quirk tore a hole in reality, yes? When you tear something, the edges are never clean. There must be residue, remnants from your world, or from the space between worlds. A meteorite, a strange mineral deposit, anything. Find it. Find me an ore worthy of this challenge, and I will forge you a blade that can slay Muzan himself. And with that, he turned and stormed off, disappearing back towards the swordsmith village as abruptly as he had arrived, leaving Izuku covered in rock dust and reeling from the encounter. The idea of a dimensional remnant was a long shot, but it was the only lead they had. Guided by Tanjiro, whose sense of smell could pick up the faintest, strangest traces in the air, Izuku returned to the forest where he had first awakened. It's here, Tanjiro said, kneeling and placing a hand on the ground in the center of the clearing. The scent of your world is the strongest here. Ozone, burnt sugar, and something else. Something cold and metallic, buried deep. With no tools available, Izuku became a human excavator. He channeled a low percentage one for all into his fingers, using the concussive force to blast away dirt and rock. He dug for nearly an hour, creating a deep crater in the forest floor. Finally, his fingers struck something hard. It wasn't rock. It was a vein of metal, but unlike any he had ever seen. It was a deep, lusterless black, so dark it seemed to drink the light. It was incredibly dense, and when Izuku touched it, he felt a faint, almost imperceptible hum, a resonance that vibrated in tune with One for All. "This is it," Izuku said, a sense of certainty washing over him. It took the combined efforts of Izuku and several Kikuchi members a full day to excavate a sizable chunk of the strange, black ore. It was impossibly heavy, requiring 4 men to lift a piece the size of a loaf of bread. They loaded it onto a cart and sent it on the long journey to the swordsmith village. Now, all Izuku could do was wait. And train. Without a weapon, he couldn't join the other slayers on missions. This frustrated him to no end, but it also gave him a unique opportunity. He couldn't learn their sword-based breathing styles, so he had to create his own path. He had to adapt his quirks, which he had so far kept hidden, for this new world. His training became a solitary, intensely focused endeavor. He spent his days in a secluded training ground behind the Butterfly Mansion, a place of tall trees and rugged terrain. First, he worked on his stamina. The Slayer's proto-concentration breathing was a revelation. It wasn't about channeling power like One for All, but about maximizing the body's natural potential by flooding the blood with oxygen. Izuku, with his hero-level endurance, picked it up with astonishing speed. He learned to maintain the breathing pattern while sleeping, while eating, while performing the most mundane tasks. The result was transformative. It didn't increase his power, but it dramatically improved his control and stamina. The drain of holding full call lessened, allowing him to maintain higher percentages for longer periods without his body screaming in protest. He began to codify his new fighting style. He wasn't a swordsman. He was a hero. His style had to reflect that. He dubbed it One for All, Full Call Hero's Breath. It was a name that honored both his past and his present. It was a fusion of 2 worlds, just like him. Black Whip became his primary tool for control and mobility. He practiced weaving the tendrils of dark energy through the trees, creating complex webs to ensnare imaginary targets. He learned to use it like Spider-Man's webs, swinging through the forest canopy at breathtaking speeds, a silent green blur. Against demons, it would be the perfect way to restrain them, to control the battlefield, and to save civilians without causing collateral damage. Float was his key to aerial superiority. In his world, it was useful for reaching high places. In this world of grounded swordsmen, it made him untouchable. He practiced hovering, making sharp, unpredictable turns in midair, and using it to launch himself into powerful dive attacks. He could become a living meteor, striking from angles no demon would ever anticipate. Danger Sense, his most passive quirk, was perhaps his most valuable. He meditated for hours, honing his ability to distinguish its signals. He learned to differentiate the general malice of a standard demon from the sharp, cold spike of a more powerful one. It was a perfect early warning system, a sixth sense that made him immune to surprise attacks. Smokescreen was for strategy. He practiced releasing dense clouds of smoke to cover his movements, to create diversions, or to mask an escape for civilians. In a forest, against a demon with superior senses, the ability to create total visual obscurity was a powerful tactical advantage. Fa Gene was his trump card. He practiced storing and releasing kinetic energy in short, explosive bursts. He could dodge an attack and, using the energy from that same movement, unleash a counterattack with twice the force. It was the key to unlocking devastating power without having to ramp up to the self-destructive levels of 100% One for All. He trained relentlessly, pushing himself to the brink every single day. He sparred with Tanjiro, who was a surprisingly difficult opponent. Izuku's power was overwhelming, but Tanjiro's technique was flawless. Tanjiro's water breathing allowed him to flow around Izuku's linear attacks, and his Hinakami Kagura, though it took a toll on his body, had a raw, explosive power that could actually force Izuku to be on the defensive. "You're like a hurricane, Midoriya-kun," Tanjiro said one evening, panting as they sat by a stream. "All raw power and force. But I'm like water. Water can't be cut. It just flows around the obstacle. You're getting stronger, Tanjiro-kun, Izuku replied, nursing a bruised arm. A glancing blow from one of Tanjiro's Hinakami Kagura forms had actually gotten past his defenses. That sun dance, it feels ancient. It feels more powerful than any other breathing style I've seen. They talked for hours, sharing stories. Izuku spoke of All Might, of his indomitable spirit, and his radiant smile. He described the sprawling campus of UA, the sports festival, the joy of learning to be a hero alongside his friends. Tanjiro, in turn, spoke of his family, of the quiet, happy life he had lost. He spoke of Nezuko, of his unwavering quest to turn her back into a human. Izuku saw in Tanjiro the same burning, selfless desire to protect that he felt in his own heart. They were two boys from two worlds, forged in the fires of tragedy, now walking parallel paths. One night, as Izuku was meditating under a waterfall, trying to master total concentration breathing in the punishingly cold water, he felt a new presence. It was the stoic water Hashira, Jutomioka. He simply stood on the bank, watching. Izuku tensed, but made no move to speak. He just observed, his deep blue eyes unreadable. After several long minutes, he finally spoke, his voice low and even. Your power is a tidal wave, Ju said. It has no form. No discipline. You will destroy yourself before you destroy your enemy. Izuku stopped his meditation, shivering in the cold water. I'm trying to control it. Trying is not enough, Ju stated flatly. A swordsman's breath is his guide. It gives him focus. It gives his power a path. You have no path. You are just an explosion. He drew his blade. The water in the stream seemed to still in its presence. Tanjiro uses water breathing. It is adaptable, flowing, capable of both defense and offense. But there are other forms. Fire is relentless aggression. Wind is speed and ferocity. Stone is unmovable defense. Thunder is singular, explosive speed. He looked at Izuku. Your power is not like any of these. It is all of them at once. Aggression, speed, defense, destruction. You must find your own form, your own river for this power to flow through. If you do not, the flood will break its banks and drown you. He sheathed his sword and turned to leave. Wait! Izuku called out. Why are you telling me this? Ju paused, his back still to Izuku. Because Tanjiro sees hope in you, he said, without turning around. And I see the same desperation in your eyes that I see in his. Don't let it consume you. He walked away, disappearing into the shadows as silently as he had arrived. Ju's words stuck with Izuku. Find your own form. He had been adapting his quirks, but he hadn't been thinking about the philosophy behind them. He was still just punching things harder. He needed a style, a true synthesis. His training shifted. It was no longer just about power, but about flow. He started combining his quirks seamlessly. He would use float to get airborne, build up momentum with FA gene, use smokescreen to obscure his approach, then use Black Whip to change his trajectory at the last second for a devastating, unpredictable strike. It was a symphony of chaos, a dance of overwhelming force directed with pinpoint precision. He was no longer just a brawler. He was becoming a true warrior, forging a new path in a world that had no place for him, yet a world he was now determined to save. He didn't know when his sword would be ready, or what new horrors awaited him. But for the first time since arriving, he felt a sense of clarity. He knew who he was. He was Izuku Midoriya. He was Deku, and he would find a way to be a hero, no matter what world he was in. Deep within the shifting, labyrinthine confines of the Infinity Castle, a place that defied all laws of physics and architecture, Muzan Kibutsuji was displeased. He stood in his laboratory, the air thick with the sterile, cloying scent of human blood and strange chemicals. Glass speakers bubbled over ethereal blue flames, and dissected human bodies, their limbs pinned to tables and grotesque displays of anatomical curiosity, littered the room. This was his sanctuary, his place of study, his eternal, obsessive quest to find the cure for his one true affliction, the sun. He held a petri dish to the light, observing the blood cells within. They were from a Merchi, a human with rare blood that was said to be worth 100 ordinary humans to a demon. It was potent, but it was not the answer. It nourished him, but it did not change his fundamental weakness. He sighed, a sound of profound, ancient boredom, and tossed the dish aside where it shattered on the floor. Nakeim, he said, his voice a low, silken baritone that echoed slightly in the vast, empty space. With a resonant twang of a biwa, the room around him shifted. A woman with long, black hair covering her face, holding a 4-string biwa, appeared kneeling on a platform a dozen feet away. She did not speak, she merely waited. The reports, Muzin commanded, turning his back on his failed experiments. His plum-red eyes, with their slitted, cat-like pupils, glowed with a cold, impatient light. Yes, Master Muzin, Nakeim's voice was a monotone, devoid of all emotion. The flow of information has been inconsistent. Several demons dispatched to the northern provinces have vanished without a trace. No reports, no final thoughts transmitted upon their destruction. They simply ceased to exist. Muzin tapped a long, perfectly manicured fingernail against a wooden table. The demon slayers are growing bold. Perhaps Kagaya has a new Hashira I am unaware of. The disappearances do not align with known Hashira activity, Master, Nakeim continued. The reports we do have, fragmented and often from terrified human witnesses, are unusual. They do not speak of a swordsman. This piqued Muzin's interest. He turned slowly. Explain. They speak of a phantom. A green demon, Nakeim said. A figure that moves faster than sight, wreathed in green lightning. They say it shatters the very earth with its fists. One report from a merchant hiding in a cellar described a demon being punched so hard it was launched into the heavens, only to burn to ash in the morning sun. Muzin's lips curled into a faint, dismissive sneer. Human hysterics. They see a slayer's colorful breathing technique, and their terrified minds invent fables of gods and monsters. Perhaps, Nakeim conceded. But 2 nights ago, we lost contact with Lower Moon 4, Mukago. She was hunting in the foothills near Sagami Bay. Her final, panic transmission was not of a blade, but of whips of pure darkness, and a force like a falling mountain. The sneer vanished from Muzin's face. The loss of a Lower Moon was not insignificant. After his recent culling of the weakest of their ranks, he expected more from those who remained. To be annihilated so quickly, and by something that wasn't even described as a Nicaran blade, was an anomaly. And Muzin hated anomalies he didn't control. A green demon that can walk in the sun, whips of darkness, impossible strength. He mused, his mind sifting through a millennium of knowledge. This does not sound like a breathing style. It sounds like a blood demon art. But no demon would turn on its own kind, especially not a Lower Moon. Not unless they were freed from my curse. He thought of Tamayo, the fugitive demon, and a flicker of irritation crossed his features. But even her power was not on this scale. Find me something concrete, Nakeim, he ordered, his voice laced with a cold edge of command. I am tired of whispers and rumors. I want to know what this thing is. As you wish, Master, Nakeim said. With another twang of her biwa, she vanished, leaving Muzin alone with his thoughts and the unsettling scent of a mystery that pricked at the edges of his perfect, ordered world. A new player had appeared on the board, one that did not follow the established rules of the game. And Muzin needed to know if this new piece was a threat or a prize. Izuku sneezed, a sudden, violent spasm that sent a small cloud of dust billowing up from the training ground. Are you all right, Midoriya-kun? Shinobu asked from her perch on a nearby rock. She was, as always, observing him, her notebook open, her smile placid. Fine, Izuku sniffled, rubbing his nose. I just got a weird chill all of a sudden. It felt like someone was talking about me. Perhaps one of the girls at the mansion has developed a crush, she teased, her eyes twinkling with a mischief that never quite matched her serene smile. You have become quite the legend. The Kaminari no Otoko, the lightning boy. The Kakushi whisper about you constantly. Izuku flushed, a deep crimson crawling up his neck. I'm just training, and train he did. Weeks had bled into a month, and the seasons were beginning to turn. The humid summer air was giving way to the crisp scent of autumn. Izuku's control over his hero's breath had grown exponentially. He could now hold a 15% full cow for hours without significant strain, thanks to his mastery of total concentration breathing. His movements were no longer just raw power, they were becoming a fluid, deadly dance, a synthesis of his 6 quirks. He still had no blade. A message had arrived from the swordsmith village a week prior, carried by a frantic Kasugai crow. It was a single, scorched piece of paper from Haganazuka that simply read, "This is more difficult than birthing a star. Be patient, you blade-murdering brat." The lack of a finishing weapon was a constant source of frustration. He was a cannon without a cannonball. He could incapacitate, restrain, and utterly dominate any standard demon he might come across, but he could not deliver the final, killing blow. This relegated him to a strange position within the Corps, an ultimate defense weapon, a search and rescue specialist, but not a true slayer. He'd been sent on a handful of low-risk missions, always accompanied by another slayer. His role was to use Black Whip to evacuate villagers, Smokescreen to create diversions, and his raw strength to demolish obstacles, allowing his partner to go in for the kill. It was effective, but it felt hollow. He felt like a glorified sidekick, a support item. He was Deku, the boy who saves people, but he wasn't yet Deku, the boy who defeats the villain. Tonight, he was patrolling a dense, mountainous region known for its disorienting mists and treacherous ravines. It was a place where travelers often went missing. A slayer had been sent to investigate 2 nights ago, and had not reported back. Kagaya had assigned this mission to him and Tanjiro, hoping Izuku's danger sense and Tanjiro's sense of smell could cut through the confusion. "Anything, Tanjiro-kun?" Izuku asked, his voice low. They were perched on a cliff edge, overlooking a valley shrouded in a thick, soupy fog. Tanjiro closed his eyes, his nose twitching. He had grown accustomed to the strange, layered scent of Izuku's quirk, the bass note of ozone, the sharp tang of Black Whip's energy, the faint heat of Fa Gene. He filtered it out, focusing on the wider world. "The scent of a demon is strong," Tanjiro said, his brow furrowed. "But it's strange. It's not just one scent. It's like several threads woven together. And underneath it all, I smell blood. A lot of it, and the faint, metallic scent of a Nichiren blade." He pointed towards the center of the valley. "That way. I think the slayer who went missing is down there." Izuku's danger sense flared in agreement. A cold, sharp needle of alarm was piercing the general thrum of unease he felt in this demon-infested forest. "Let's go. Fast and quiet." He activated float, lifting silently off the ground. He wrapped a tendril of Black Whip around Tanjiro's waist, and with a gentle tug, lifted his friend into the air with him. "Whoa!" Tanjiro gasped, his feet dangling 100 feet above the treetops. The sensation of weightless flight was still unnerving. "Hold on tight," Izuku whispered, and they descended into the mist-choked valley like a silent, green comet. They landed in a clearing that was a scene of utter devastation. The ground was torn up, trees were splintered, and the air was thick with the coppery stench of blood. In the center of the clearing lay the body of a demon slayer, his uniform torn, his blade broken beside him. But his body hadn't been eaten. It had been arranged, positioned in a mockery of a martial arts stance, propped up against the rock. "This is cruel," Tanjiro whispered, his fists clenched. "Why would a demon do this?" "To send a message," Izuku said, his eyes scanning the perimeter. "To instill fear." Danger sense suddenly screamed, a deafening klaxon in his skull. "Tanjiro, jump!" Izuku tackled his friend, pushing them both to the ground as something shot through the space they had just occupied. It was a blur of motion, silent and impossibly fast. It struck a massive boulder behind them, which split in two with a deafening crack. They scrambled to their feet, turning to face the attacker. A figure emerged from the mist, landing lightly on the fractured boulder. It was a man, powerfully built, with short, bright pink hair and piercing yellow eyes that had the characters for Upper Moon 3 etched into them. His skin was pale white, adorned with thick blue lines that covered his body like intricate tattoos. He wore no shirt, only baggy white pants and a rope belt. He exuded an aura of such immense pressure and power that the very air around him seemed to grow heavy. This was not like the demon from the village. This was something else entirely. This was a predator of a different order of magnitude. "Well now," the demon said, a wide, almost cheerful grin splitting his face. "I was just finishing my warm-up." I must say, your reflexes are impressive. His gaze flickered from Tanjiro, whom he dismissed almost instantly as weak, to Izuku. His grin widened. You! The one in green. Your fighting spirit, it's bizarre. It's not the sharp, honed blade of a swordsman. It's a furnace. A raging, uncontrolled inferno of raw power. Magnificent! This was Akaza. Upper Moon 3. A demon who lived for the thrill of battle, who respected only strength. Muzan had not sent him here specifically to find the anomaly. He'd sent him to sharpen his skills on whatever slayers he could find. Stumbling upon this scene was a happy coincidence. My name is Akaza, he announced, hopping down from the boulder. Tell me your name, powerful one. I want to remember it when I kill you. Izuku pushed Tanjiro behind him. Get back, he ordered, his voice low and serious. You can't fight him. His power is on a different level. Tanjiro didn't need to be told. He could feel it. The pressure emanating from Akaza was suffocating, a physical weight that made his lungs burn and his limbs tremble. It was far beyond the power of the demon in the village. This was the presence of a true calamity. I am Deku, Izuku said, his body crackling to life with the green lightning of 20% full cowl. The ground beneath his feet began to crack under the strain. And I'm the one who's going to stop you. Akaza's grin became ecstatic. Deku! A fine name! Now, show me what you can do. Don't disappoint me. He vanished. He didn't just move fast. He simply ceased to be in one place and appeared in another. Danger sense was the only thing that saved Izuku. A fraction of a second before Akaza's fist would have connected with his temple, Izuku threw himself backward, the wind from the mist punch buffeting his hair. Technique development, destructive death, compass needle. A snowflake-like pattern materialized on the ground beneath Akaza's feet. My compass detects your fighting spirit, he roared with glee. You can't hide from me. He lunged again, a flurry of punches and kicks, each one carrying enough force to shatter stone. Destructive death, air type. He punched the empty air, creating powerful, invisible shockwaves that ripped through the clearing towards Izuku. Izuku used float to launch himself vertically, the shockwaves passing harmlessly beneath him. From the air, he unleashed Black Whip, sending a dozen dark tendrils snaking down towards Akaza. Ooh, a blood demon art? Akaza laughed, not even trying to dodge. He simply punched the incoming whips, his fists moving in a blur. Each punch carried a concussive force that disintegrated the energy tendrils on contact. Interesting, but weak. He's too fast and too strong, Izuku thought, his mind racing. A direct confrontation is what he wants. I have to change the battlefield. He landed, slapping his hands on the ground. Smoke screen. A massive, thick cloud of black smoke erupted from his body, instantly engulfing the entire clearing in impenetrable darkness. Hiding? A coward's tactic. Akaza's voice boomed from within the smoke, but there was a hint of frustration in it. His compass needed a target. It was hard to lock on when his opponent's visual presence was gone, and their fighting spirit was flickering all over the place. From within the smoke, Izuku was a phantom. He used FA gene, building kinetic energy with short, sharp movements. He combined it with float, ricocheting off trees at the edge of the clearing, building speed and power. He was a pinball of destruction, his location constantly changing. Akaza stood in the center of the smoke, his senses on high alert. Come out and face me like a man. He got his wish. Izuku burst from the smoke cloud from above, a green meteor descending from the heavens. He had channeled all the stored energy from FA gene into his right leg. This wasn't a smash. This was a focused, piercing attack. Hero's breath, Wyoming axe. His heel, glowing with a terrifying intensity, came down like a guillotine. Akaza's eyes widened. He crossed his arms above his head to block, the snowflake compass beneath him glowing brightly. The impact was cataclysmic. The ground for 50 feet in every direction shattered. A massive crater was formed, the shockwave blowing away the mist, the smoke, and sending Tanjiro tumbling backward. The sound was a deafening boom that echoed through the mountains for miles. When the dust settled, Izuku was standing in the center of the crater, his leg buried up to the knee in the fractured earth. Akaza was a few feet away, on one knee, his arms trembling. The skin on his forearms was shredded, exposing the muscle and bone beneath, but it was already healing at a visible rate. Incredible. Akaza breathed, a trickle of blood dripping from his mouth. He looked at his regenerating arms, then back at Izuku, his eyes gleaming with something that transcended bloodlust. It was pure, unadulterated respect. You actually hurt me. You broke my stance. No one has done that in a century. Not since. He trailed off, the memory of another powerful foe flickering in his mind. He stood up, his body fully regenerated. What is that power? It carries the weight of a god. You must become a demon, Deku. With your strength and my techniques, we could reach the heights of martial arts. We could fight for all eternity, growing stronger together. It's the ultimate dream. Izuku stared at him, horrified. Become a monster like you? A creature that kills innocent people and desecrates the dead? Never. A hero's job is to save people, not devour them. Akaza's joyful expression soured. Save people? The weak? They exist only to be culled. They are stepping stones for the strong. You are wasting your magnificent gift on protecting mayflies. It's a tragedy. The tone of the battle had shifted. It was no longer a simple fight. It was an ideological clash. You're wrong, Izuku said, his voice quiet but resolute. Protecting the weak is what makes you strong. It's the entire point. He thought of All Might, shielding civilians with his broken body. He thought of his mother's tears. He thought of Aries' tiny, hopeful smile. That was true strength. A foolish sentiment, Akaza snarled, his patience gone. He dropped back into his stance. If you will not join me, then I will offer your strength to him as a tribute. Your death will have meaning. He prepared to launch his final, most devastating attack. Destructive death, annihilation type. The air around him began to distort with the sheer pressure of his power. But just as he was about to lunge, a change occurred. The deep, oppressive darkness of the mountain night was beginning to soften. A faint, gray light was appearing on the eastern horizon. The sun. Akaza froze. A look of pure, primal panic flashed across his face. No! Not yet! Our fight isn't over. He glared at Izuku, a look of profound frustration and longing on his face. This isn't finished, Deku. I will find you again. And next time, we will fight under a moonlit sky until one of us is dust. I swear it. And with that, he turned and fled, disappearing into the deep shadows of the forest with a speed that defied belief. He was gone, leaving behind only a cratered battlefield and the scent of ozone and blood. Izuku finally allowed his full cowl to dissipate. His body screamed in protest. The Wyoming axe attack had put a tremendous strain on his leg, and the brief but incredibly intense fight had drained his stamina more than any training session. He stumbled, catching himself on the edge of the crater. Tanjiro rushed to his side. Midoriya-kun! Are you alright? That was an upper moon. Upper. 3 Izuku gasped, his mind still reeling. He had survived. He had fought an upper moon to a standstill. He hadn't won, but he hadn't lost. He had survived. Far away, in the Infinity Castle, Akaza reappeared before his master. He knelt, his head bowed. Akaza, Muzen's voice was dangerously soft. You were sent to eliminate slayers. Instead, you return with the dawn, empty-handed and smelling of a strange, powerful energy. Report. Akaza looked up, his eyes still burning with the phantom thrill of the fight. Master Muzen. I have found him. The anomaly. The green demon from the rumors. He described the battle in vivid detail. The whips of darkness, the impenetrable smoke, the ability to fly, and the earth-shattering power of his strikes. He described Izuku's power not as a technique, but as a fundamental force of nature. He is human, Master, Akaza said, his voice filled with a reverence he usually reserved only for Muzen. I am certain of it. He bleeds. He breathes. He holds foolish ideals about protecting the weak, but his power is beyond anything I have ever encountered in a human. It rivals my own, and he does it all without a single demonic art. Muzen listened, his expression unreadable, but a predatory gleam entered his plum-red eyes. A human with power rivaling an upper moon. This wasn't a descendant of the Sunbreathers. Their techniques were fire-based, tied to their blades. This was something entirely new. A genetic fluke of cosmic proportions. And then, the final, most important piece of the puzzle clicked into place. He regenerates from devastating injuries, Musen thought, connecting the dots of his own experiments. He produces an unbelievable amount of cellular energy. He is a fountain of vitality, a perfect biological specimen. The blue spider lily, the mythical flower he had sought for 1,000 years, was a means to an end. The goal was to rewrite his own cellular structure, to remove the fatal flaw that tied him to the darkness. And now, a living solution had literally fallen into his lap from another world. The boy's blood. His cells. His unique genetic code. If I can consume him, Musen realized, a slow, terrible smile spreading across his face. If I can analyze and assimilate his quirk, his ability to generate and contain such impossible energy, I could overcome the sun. I could become a perfect being. The boy was no longer an obstacle. He was no longer just a curiosity. He was the key. The ultimate prize. The final ingredient. Akaza, Musen said, his voice now filled with a chilling, possessive hunger. Your new mission is absolute. The other upper moons will be informed. The hunt is on. He looked out into the shifting, impossible architecture of his castle, but he was seeing the face of a green-haired boy. Find the green anomaly. Find Izuku Midoriya. And bring him to me. Alive. The news of a direct confrontation between an unranked Slayer ally and Upper Moon 3 sent shockwaves through the Demon Slayer Corps. Izuku Midoriya's status skyrocketed overnight from fascinating anomaly to priceless strategic asset. The fact that he had survived, let alone fought Akaza to a standstill until sunrise, was a feat that even most Hashira would struggle to accomplish. Izuku, however, didn't feel like a hero. He felt the gnawing, familiar weight of inadequacy. He had survived, yes, but he hadn't won. He hadn't been able to protect the fallen Slayer, and Akaza had escaped, free to kill again. The lack of a Nichiren blade was a constant, throbbing ache in his strategic mind. He was a shield without a sword, a protector who couldn't mete out final justice. He threw himself back into his training with a renewed, almost frantic intensity. The encounter with Akaza had given him a terrifyingly clear benchmark. That was the level of his enemies. That was the power he had to be prepared to overcome. It was during one of these grueling sessions, as he was practicing weaving Black Whip into intricate, high-speed nets between the massive cedar trees behind the butterfly mansion, that a new presence arrived. It was a presence impossible to ignore. Brilliant! Utterly brilliant! A flamboyant display of dexterity and power. A voice boomed, dripping with theatricality. Izuku lost his concentration for a split second. The Black Whip tendril he was standing on wavered, and he dropped a few feet before instinctively activating float to stabilize himself. He turned, hovering in midair, to see the sound Hashira, Tengen Yuzui, leaning against a tree. He wasn't in his Slayer uniform but in a more casual, yet no less extravagant, outfit. He had his arms crossed over his massive chest, a wide, confident grin on his face. His jeweled headband glittered in the dappled sunlight. Yuzui-san, Izuku said, landing softly on the ground, the green lightning of full cowl dissipating. None of that formal nonsense. Call me Tengen. Or Lord Tengen, if you're feeling particularly flamboyant, he said with a wink. I saw your handiwork back there. That Black Whip, you call it? A flashy technique. Very impressive. I'm just practicing, Izuku said, feeling a little flustered under the Hashira's intense scrutiny. Good. Practice makes perfect, and perfection is the height of flamboyance, Tengen declared. Which is why I'm here. I've come to requisition you, my boy. I have a mission of the utmost importance, one that requires a very specific, and very flashy, set of skills. And you, my green-haired anomaly, fit the bill perfectly. Izuku blinked. A mission? For me? But I'm not a full Slayer. I don't have a blade. Details, Tengen waved a dismissive hand. This mission isn't about charging in and lopping off heads. Not at first, anyway. It's a stealth mission. An infiltration, and your bizarre powers are extravagantly suited for it. Pack your things. We're going to the most decadent, lust-filled, and demon-haunted place in all of Japan, the Entertainment District. The Yoshiwara Entertainment District was an assault on the senses. As Izuku, Tanjiro, Zenitsu, and Inosuke followed Tengen through the crowded streets, Izuku felt completely and utterly overwhelmed. In his world, he'd seen bustling city centers, but this was different. This wasn't the orderly chaos of modern society. This was a raw, unfiltered river of human desire. Lanterns of every color hung from the eaves of ornate buildings, casting a warm, seductive glow on the throngs of people below. The air was thick with the sense of expensive perfume, street food, sake, and something else, a current of desperation and ambition that was almost palpable. The sounds were a cacophony, the lively twang of shamisen music, the laughter of beautiful women in vibrant kimonos, the boisterous calls of merchants, and the drunken boasts of wealthy patrons. It was a city that never slept, a monument to earthly pleasures, where dreams were sold for a night and fortunes were won and lost. And somewhere, beneath all the glitter and glamour, a demon was hunting. "All right, listen up, you unflamboyant little warts," Tengen said, gathering them in a secluded alleyway. He had already changed into a less conspicuous, though still incredibly stylish, outfit, his face mostly hidden by a cloth wrap. "My 3 wives, all excellent kunoichi, were investigating this district for demonic activity. But I've lost contact with them. Makio, Suma, and Hinetsuru. Your primary mission is to find them and get them out. Finding the demon is secondary." His tone, for a moment, lost its usual bombast, replaced by a raw, genuine concern that surprised Izuku. This wasn't just a mission for Tengen, it was personal. "We'll be going undercover," Tengen continued, his flamboyant flair returning. "There are 3 prominent houses in this district where we suspect the demon might be hiding or operating. The Takito House, the Kayagaka House, and the Ajimoto House. You 3, he pointed at Tanjiro, Zenitsu, and Inosuke, will infiltrate them by pretending to be girls seeking work." The proclamation was met with stunned silence, followed by a predictable explosion. "Girls?" Zenitsu shrieked, his face turning pale. "No way! Impossible! I'd rather die. I'm not ugly enough to be a convincing boy, let alone a girl." "Ha! What's a girl?" Inosuke asked, tilting his boar mask in confusion. "Is that a type of food?" Tanjiro just looked deeply uncomfortable. Yuzui-san, with all due respect, I don't think we have the qualifications." Tengen ignored their protests, producing a case filled with makeup. "Nonsense! With my flamboyant makeup skills, I'll make you so ugly you'll loop back around to being cute." What followed was one of the most bizarre and humiliating experiences of Izuku's life, though thankfully, he was only a spectator. Tengen slapped on makeup with the subtlety of a construction worker plastering a wall. The end results, Tenjiko, Zenko, and Inoko, were monstrosities. They looked less like aspiring courtesans and more like cursed kabuki actors. Izuku watched, a sweat drop rolling down his temple. Tengen-san? What about me? What's my role?" Tengen finished admiring his handiwork and turned to Izuku. "You, my boy, are a different story. Your powers make you uniquely suited for a different kind of infiltration. Your danger sense is perfect for reconnaissance. Your black whip is a god-tier tool for non-lethal crowd control and maneuvering in this packed environment. You won't be infiltrating a house directly. You'll be my eyes and ears on the outside. Your job is to be the delivery boy." He handed Izuku a simple, plain yukata and a large, empty wicker basket. "You'll pose as a runner for a rice merchant. You'll make deliveries all over the district, to every house, every restaurant, every back alley. It gives you the perfect excuse to be everywhere. Keep your ears open, your eyes peeled, and that danger sense of yours on high alert. Map out the district. Learn the patrol routes of the city watch. Find the places where the shadows are deepest. If you sense anything at all, you report to me. Do not engage. Understood?" "Yes, sir," Izuku said, relieved that he didn't have to wear the horrifying makeup. The plan, as chaotic as it was, worked. Sort of. Tengen managed to sell off the ugly but surprisingly strong trio to the 3 houses. Tenjiko, was taken in by the Takito house, Inosuke, Inoko, by the Ajimoto house, and Zenitsu, Zenko, after much wailing and protest, ended up at the Kayagaka house. Izuku, meanwhile, began his own mission. Dressed in the simple yukata, his hero costume bundled tightly at the bottom of his wicker basket, he melted into the river of people. He was just another face in the crowd, a humble delivery boy nobody would look at twice. It was maddening. His danger sense was a constant, low-level hum. The district was saturated with negative emotions, greed, envy, despair, lust. It was impossible to pick out a single, sharp threat from the background noise. It was like trying to hear a whisper in the middle of a rock concert. For 2 days he walked. He walked until his feet were sore, crisscrossing every inch of the district. He delivered sacks of rice, picked up payments, and eavesdropped. He learned the rhythm of the city. He saw the beautiful Oiran parading down the main street, their faces masks of perfect white makeup. He saw the desperation in the eyes of the young girls just starting their service. He saw the casual cruelty of wealthy patrons, and the quiet dignity of the servants who cleaned up after them. This world, in some ways, felt even more broken than his own. At home, the lines between hero and villain were usually clear. Here, the darkness was woven into the very fabric of society, hidden behind a veneer of beauty and pleasure. He used his quirk sparingly, in ways no one would notice. A small burst from float to lighten the load of his basket. A flicker of 5% full cowl to quickly duck down an alley before anyone saw him. A tendril of black whip, invisible in the deep shadows of the rooftops, to pull himself up for a better vantage point at night. He checked in with Tengen each evening. The sound Hashira was growing more and more frustrated. Nothing, Tengen grumbled, pacing on a rooftop overlooking the glittering district. Inosuke reports that Makio was at the Ajimoto house, but she's vanished. Tanjiro found traces of Suma at the Takito house, but she's gone too. And Zenitsu hasn't reported in at all. I'm starting to get a bad feeling about the Kayagaka house. My danger sense is strongest around that area too, Izuku confirmed. It's still just a buzz, but it's sharpest there. The Oiran of that house. Konatsu Oiran, is that her name? No, not Konatsu. She's a good woman, Tengen corrected. The one I'm worried about is Warabiheim. She's the reigning beauty, incredibly popular, but notoriously cruel. Several girls have lost their footing and disappeared from her service. It's too suspicious. On the third night, the breakthrough came from an unlikely source, Inosuke. The boar-headed slayer, with his animalistic senses, had not been looking for a demon. He'd been hunting for a lair. He'd felt a strange, subtle vibration in the walls of the Ajimoto house, a slithering, unnatural presence. He'd followed it, smashing through a wall in his room, much to the owner's fury, and discovered a network of tunnels. Tunnels made not of earth, but of a strange, fleshy material. They move like snakes. Inosuke reported excitedly, meeting Izuku and Tengen. They lead everywhere, under the whole house. I followed one and it went towards that tall building. He pointed directly at the Kayagaka house. At the same time, Tanjiro arrived, his face pale. Konatsu Oiran is leaving tonight. She said she felt like she was being watched by something in the walls. And she told me about Zenitsu. He confronted Warabiheim Oiran, and then he vanished. Izuku's danger sense, which had been a dull hum, suddenly sharpened into a high-pitched whine. Danger. Immediate. Close. That's it, Tengen said, his voice dropping to a low growl. The flamboyant persona was gone, replaced by the cold lethality of a Hashira. Warabiheim is the demon. She has Zenitsu. We're moving in. Tonight. The plan was simple. Tengen would confront Warabiheim directly. Inosuke and Tanjiro would use the tunnels to search for the captured wives and Zenitsu. Izuku's role was crucial. You are the safety net, Deku, Tengen said, his eyes serious. Your first priority is civilian evacuation. This is going to get messy, and this district is packed tighter than a drum. I need you to get people out of the immediate vicinity. Use that smoke of yours. Use those black whips to pull people from collapsing buildings. Create chaos, create a distraction, but keep the innocents clear. Can you do it? Izuku looked out at the glittering city, at the thousands of lives contained within it. This was what he was born to do. Yes. I can. He shed his delivery boy disguise, the familiar weight of his hero costume settling on his shoulders like a second skin. He pulled the tattered cowl over his head. The green lightning of One for All began to crackle around him. Deku was back on the job. As Tengen, Tanjiro, and Inosuke prepared to infiltrate the Kyogaku house, Izuku took to the rooftops. He moved like a phantom, a green blur against the night sky, using float and black whip to navigate the maze of buildings. His danger sense was now a constant, screaming siren focused on one location. He perched on a roof across from the Kyogaku house, his eyes scanning the streets below. He needed to be ready. He saw Konatsu-eren, the kind courtesan Tanjiro had spoken of, leaving the house with her attendants. As she turned a corner, a shadow detached itself from the rooftop of the Kyogaku house. It was the demon. Warabeheim. She was beautiful, ethereal in the moonlight, her elaborate kimono fluttering around her. But as she landed silently on the street, something about her seemed to unfold. Sashes, made of the same fabric as her obi belt, unspooled from her back, writhing like living snakes. Leaving so soon, Konatsu? The demon cooed, her voice sickly sweet. You weren't planning on telling anyone what you've seen, were you? Konatsu screamed. Before the demon could strike, a blur of motion intercepted her. Tenjin Yuzui, his massive Nichiren cleavers drawn, appeared between them. Looks like you're not as pretty up close, he grinned. Your flamboyant flair is a solid 0. The battle began. That was Izuku's cue. While Tenjin engaged the demon, Izuku focused on the streets. He dropped down into a crowded thoroughfare a block away from the fight. Everyone, get out of here! He yelled, his voice amplified by a low percentage of One for All. There's a gas leak. It's going to explode. People panicked, but their movements were slow, confused. He needed more. He slapped his hands together. Smoke screen! A massive, disorienting cloud of smoke billowed through the street, adding to the panic but also obscuring the terrifying battle happening just around the corner. This way! To safety! He yelled, using Black Whip to point towards the district's exit. He then launched himself back to the rooftops, his eyes scanning for anyone trapped or in danger. He saw a balcony on a nearby building start to groan and crack, damaged by the shockwave of Tengen's attacks. A family was huddled on it, too scared to move. Hold on! Izuku yelled. He shot 2 tendrils of Black Whip, which wrapped securely around the balcony's railing. With a mighty heave, he stabilized the structure, then created a makeshift bridge of woven whips leading to the next roof. Cross, now! Quickly! He spent the next few minutes as a one-man emergency response team. He pulled people from windows, reinforced collapsing walls, and guided the panicked crowds away from the battle. He was a whirlwind of green energy and black whips, his actions chaotic but his purpose clear: save everyone. Meanwhile, the fight between Tengen and the demon, whose name was Daki, was escalating. Daki's sashes were like living blades, impossibly sharp and fast, capable of slicing through buildings. Tengen, with his incredible speed and skill, was holding his own, his sound breathing creating a symphony of explosions that countered her attacks. But it wasn't enough. Daki was an Upper Moon. Upper Moon 6. And she was far from alone. Suddenly Izuku's danger sense went into overdrive. It wasn't just coming from Daki anymore. A second, far more venomous presence erupted from her back. It was a new demon, skeletal and emaciated, with a cruel, twisted face and sickles made of his own flesh and blood. This was Jotaro, Daki's brother, and the true holder of the Upper Moon 6 rank. Well, look what we have here, Jotaro rasped, his voice like grinding glass. A Hashira. You're a tasty-looking one. All those muscles, you must be delicious. The situation had just become exponentially worse. Tengen was now facing 2 Upper Moon-level demons at once. Izuku watched in horror as Jotaro moved with a speed that even Tengen struggled to match, his poison sickles slashing at the sound Hashira. He had to intervene. His mission was to protect civilians, but he couldn't stand by and watch a Hashira die. He had finished clearing the immediate area. The choice was clear. He used FA Gene, building up kinetic energy as he bounded across the rooftops. He saw an opening. Jotaro had just launched an attack, leaving his back exposed for a nanosecond. Izuku launched himself off the roof. Detroit Smash. He aimed a 45% smash not at Jotaro himself, but at the ground right behind him. The resulting explosion of force was immense. The street buckled, and Jotaro was sent flying forward from the shockwave, stumbling and losing his balance. It gave Tenjin the opening he needed to dodge what would have been a fatal blow from Daki's sashes. What the? Jotaro snarled, whipping his head around to see the green-clad boy landing in a crouch. Another one? And you're not even a slayer. I'm his flamboyant little apprentice. Tenjin yelled, grinning despite the blood trickling from a new cut on his arm. Got a problem with that? At the same time, Tanjiro and Inosuke erupted from a nearby building, having successfully located and freed Tengen's wives and Zenitsu. The full cast was now on stage. The battle for the entertainment district had truly begun. Izuku stood beside a Hashira, facing down two of the most powerful demons in existence. His heart hammered in his chest, not with fear, but with a fierce, burning resolve. He had no blade. He had no way to kill them. But he would be damned if he let them lay a hand on anyone else. He was a hero, and this was his stage.